And Hegseth has denied, some of the comments that were reported by the Washington Post, and he says that he stands by the combat decisions of a military commander involved in the deadly strike on that suspected drug vessel. And he also says that we have just begun striking terrorists. Take a listen.
As I've said, and I'll say again, we've only just begun striking narco boats and putting narco-terrorists at the bottom of the ocean because they've been poisoning the American people. And Joe Biden tried to approach it with kid gloves and allowed them to come across the border. Cartels take over community, 20 million people, hundreds of thousands of Americans poisoned. And President Trump said, no, we're taking the gloves off. We're taking the fight to these designated terror organizations. And it's exactly what we're doing. So we're stopping the drugs. We're striking the boats. We're defeating narco-terrorists.
Donald Trump joined in there supporting Pete Hegseth and added that plenty of drugs that were coming into America via the sea, they are now down significantly. Hegseth also went on to say that this is about deterrence. And of course it is. I mean, the amount of drug boats coming into America, they're slowing down. So what do you make of this? Obviously, Hegseth is being attacked. There's a lot of controversy around what the Trump administration is doing. Do the American people support this, or is this going to impact Trump politically?
No, they do support this. And what he said was all exactly correct. This is an issue that is afflicting this country. And by the way, this is not just a bunch of people trying to make money by selling drugs, right? This is actually more of a strategic thing by China, who is trying to create social upheaval in this country. A lot of these things that are used, the chemicals that are used for these drugs come from China. So this is a larger problem that we're facing. It's not just about making money and war on drugs like we had in like the 80s and 90s. This is really more of a, not just a tactical, but a strategic issue for us vis-a-vis China, South America, who are trying to degrade our way of life and trying to create a lot of issues for our country societally, which is exactly what they're doing.
Let's talk about Tim Walz, who is, of course, at the centre of this massive fraud scandal because under his watch in Minnesota, hundreds of millions of taxpayer dollars have reportedly been going to Somalia. Now, US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has launched a federal investigation into claims that Minnesota tax dollars were siphoned to the terrorist group Al-Shabaab under the Biden administration and Governor Tim Walz. An allegation, he said, demands urgent scrutiny. Now, this fraud scandal, Army, has raised concerns around what else is going on in Minnesota under Tim Walz. And Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem revealed today that half of all visa holders in Minnesota submitted fraudulent applications. She said, you told me to look into Minnesota and their fraud on visa and their programs. 50% of them are fraudulent, which means that wacko Governor Tim Walz either is an idiot or he did it on purpose, and I think that he's both. So, Army, I mean, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think that is both. And of course, look, just because you had a visa approved, there's no law that says you have to be in this country. And if certainly you were trying to, you fraudulently try to acquire a visa, you can and probably should be shipped out of this country. This is an incredible, really a truly incredible story that's barely being covered by the mainstream media. And when it is, it's being covered all wrong. You know, I'll talk about that in a second. But like, again, you're talking about $1 billion was stolen through fraud from the American people. And just in terms of context, right? What $1 billion here and $1 billion there, all of a sudden we're talking about real money. $1 billion is more than 4 times what Minneapolis, the biggest city in Minnesota, spends on their entire law enforcement budget, okay?
Wow.
And that, you know, that money was spent, as they said, on with luxury cars and real estate in Turkey and Nigeria. And by the way, I looked it up. Your real estate dollars go very far in Nigeria. I can only imagine what kind of palaces, what kind of villas they're paying with that. And oh yeah, of course, like you said, it's going to terrorist organizations like Al-Shabaab. What I find so curious is that they stole $1 billion, but only gave a few million to Al-Shabaab. Like that's less than 1% of what they stole. I mean, come on, guys. If you really feel strongly about it, that's really selfish to keep most of the money for yourself. Okay, I'm just saying. But Walz is incredible, right? So first of all, he knew about this for years. This is not brand new. He's known this for years. but has been afraid because of he didn't want to have smack of racism, right? And some kind of anti-Somalian bent in Minnesota, because they're a really huge part of the Democratic Party in Minnesota. And there's an American Somali legislator who said the quiet part out loud. He said, look, the reason why this is ignored is because we are so powerful in the Democratic Party. And that there was an X account that we're not exactly 100% sure whether or not it was real or not, but there was an X account that purported to represent 500 people from Human Services in Minnesota who said they were threatened when they brought up this issue to Waltz and his people. So yeah, that is an incredible indictment of Waltz. But unbelievably, he was on Meet the Press, and they spent more time on Meet the Press talking about how President Trump called him a retard than they spent on this actual serious issue, the scandal of scandals in Minnesota. They spent more time talking about that stupid issue than this issue. And he took no responsibility for what went on. In fact, he went on the offense, and the host of Meet the Press had no follow-up questions, no pushback, no nothing. It was unbelievable. Look, there is an issue with the Somali community. Okay, I went there. I've been there actually a couple times interviewing the Somali community. There's an issue with assimilation. You just can't get away around it, okay? Where I asked them whether or not they should live under American law, Sharia law. They wanted to live under Sharia law. They felt that Somalia was a better place for them if they're living here. And this is not really, again, an anti-Africa issue. Nigerian immigrants are among the most successful immigrants in our country, economically, education. It's not about that. Somalis just are not assimilating as other cultures are, and we have to look into that.
And you made the point that this is barely being covered on the mainstream media. Of course, New York Times reported on it, but looking at the coverage, ABC News Tonight didn't touch it. NBC's Nightly News, CBS Evening News also has not mentioned Tim Waltz by name in the past week, Army, while all of this is going on and this is being revealed. This is according to reports out of Fox News. And they also didn't use the terms Somali or Somalian. They were not used in any of the three newscasts in the past week. And it's a huge part of this scandal, as you say. Look, let's listen to Caroline Levitt on Tim Waltz.
About how Somali immigrants in Minnesota have been ripping off American taxpayers. In fact, 86 people have been charged in a rampant and widespread fraud scheme spanning multiple programs in Minnesota. Of those 86, 78 of those people are Somali, 91% of them charged. So far, 59 of those people have been convicted for their roles in fraud plots that have stolen $1 billion from taxpayers. In one scheme, and this is egregious, a nonprofit and its affiliates with these Somali migrants claimed to have fed tens of thousands of American children during the pandemic. They were reimbursed for those meals by taxpayers. However, federal prosecutors found that almost all of those meals were never even delivered to hungry children. In fact, those organizations' leaders spent the money on houses, luxury cars, and real estate in Turkey and Kenya.
I mean, this scandal is extraordinary, Army. Will Tim Waltz be able to survive this? Surely he should be resigning.
Well, he's coming up for election, and the problem is Minnesota is a pretty blue state. I mean, Jacob Fry, the mayor of Minneapolis, is a full-on crazy person. He was giving a press conference, just broke into Somali like randomly. So will he survive? I mean, I think he might. I think he will survive because he's got allies in the Democratic Party and obviously allies in the media. If the media's not covering this, this is not going to break out and pick up enough steam for him to lose power. So yeah, I think he's going to survive. Unbelievable. It's unbelievable.
And he could have been the vice president. Kamala Harris and Tim Waltz. Can you imagine that? God. I know. Now let's move on. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem also announced that she's recommending a sweeping travel ban on every country that she claims is sending dangerous people to the US. Now, this, of course, comes after that horrific attack last week on the eve of Thanksgiving, where an Afghan national allegedly shot 2 National Guard members in Washington, D.C., just blocks away from the White House. And Army, again, raising concerns around the vetting process under Biden. I'd like to get your thoughts on that and if the travel ban is the right move at the moment.
Look, it's a horrific story, obviously, from a number of angles. I do believe that the people who helped us in Afghanistan, right? This guy, for example, worked with the CIA, and he was part of a very special squad that helped the CIA take out guys who were killing our troops. I think those people should be looked at and strongly recommended to come to the U.S. through a vetting process, of course. The problem is, the larger problem is that it seemed like he was radicalized here. And the blame game, the vetting, the not vetting, okay, it's a fair fight, fair argument. But the truth is that it seems like he was radicalized while he was here, which is a much, much bigger problem, because you can ban people, right? You can have a travel ban. You can stop people from coming in here. The problem is that we already have a large group of people here, and if they're being radicalized internally, that is much more difficult to stop. Okay, that is a much, much larger problem for us. And we have to come to terms with our immigration process. I am pro-immigration. I am a product of immigration. Immigration is good for our country. It is necessary for our country. That doesn't mean everyone has a ticket to come here. Not everyone has a golden ticket. We have to be judicious on who we allow, who we don't allow, and that is not non-American to say our borders are open for everybody, okay? It's never the way we were, it's not the way we are, and it will not help us in the future if that's the tack we're gonna take, like it was on the Democrats.
Yeah, well said. Look, finally, Mamdani, Socialist New York City Mayor-elect, Zoran Mamdani, he's less than a month away from being sworn in, and he's recently appointed Tamika Malloy, a defund the police activist, to his transition team. I'm shocked, Army. I didn't see that one coming. Can I get your reaction?
Yeah, I mean, look, this guy is going to give us fodder and things to talk about for 4 years. So in that way, I kind of appreciate him, okay? The problem is I live in New York. You don't, Gabriella, so I have to deal with this, and you don't have to. I mean, I'm not sure why we're talking about Tamika and her abolish the police policies, because Mamdani himself is abolish the police. You know, again, a couple of quotes that bear repeating. Mamdani, when asked about violent felonies, he said, violence is an artificial construct. No, it's not. He was asked about prison reform. He said, I don't know why we need prison. These are his direct quotes. Maybe my favorite, and the one that vexes me the most, I'm not even sure I fully understand it, was when he said, when the boot of the NYPD is on your throat, it's laced by the IDF. That's a twofer, right? I love that one because it's both anti-police and anti-Semitic. But no, Tamika is incredibly problematic, right? She is also a fan of Farrakhan, one of the great anti-Semites of the United States living today. And by the way, his entire team is full of these people. Basically, the DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America, is their like farm team, right? I don't know if you guys know what that is in Australia, but it's a baseball term. Like that's where their recruiting arm for Mamdani's transition team. This guy, Alex Vitale, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right. This guy is the OG Abolish the Police. He literally wrote the book on it when he wrote a book called End of Policing. This guy is on his transition team as well. Yeah, I think Mamdani's been fronting that I'm not a radical. Like he's not fronting he's a centrist, but he's fronting like I'm not a crazy radical. Yeah, nothing could be further from the truth. He is going to make Bill de Blasio look like Ronald Reagan. We are in for a ride.
Yeah, absolutely. Army Horowitz, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it.
Always a pleasure.